this is Meme Analysis, and today we're going to be talking about a few very special Christmas topics. About Santa Claus and his pagan origins, and about some of the occult ideas behind the birth of Christ. So, if you want to have a nice celebration of Christmas and its strange, interesting symbolism, stick around. Santa Claus. Now, the origin of Santa Claus has its root in the pagan god Odin. Now, Odin, of course, is a warrior god, but he is also occasionally seen as an old man. Just as many of the old gods did, they would go to Earth in human guise, and his human guise tended to be an old man with a white beard. And he would even give gifts to children and carry a sack on his back. This was a regular occurrence. He was kind to children, but of course he was also a grave killer and did many terrible things. That is the nature of a pagan god. It's a god that can be kind to children and do wicked things. It is a moral ambiguity, one that is unknown to Christianity. And so, when the Christians came over to, say, Germany, Norway, and so on, countries who had Odin or Wotan or Woden as their god, they needed to find a way to recapture the belief in Odin and redirect it towards Christianity. Now, this was not just done by saying, oh, your gods are fake. Believe in the one true God, of course. We know Christians have saints and have demons. Both of these act as kind of heat sinks for the beliefs of the peoples that they are assimilating. And so the belief in Odin is split in two. Christianity, in its dualistic morality, always splits pagan ambiguity. A singular pagan god is always made into a saint and into a demon. The saint is Saint Nick, Santa Claus, and the demon is Krampus, or Belschnickel. Now, it's very important that we see the word Nick in both of their titles, because Nick, or Nickel, is the German word for demon. So you have Saint Nick, in a way almost just the good demon, and Belschnickel, or Krampus, who is obviously the bad demon, eating children, kidnapping children, and harming naughty children, whereas Santa Claus is, of course, doing everything for good children. And so we see the unconscious archetype of good and evil coming into play as Christianity overtakes a kind of primordial moral ambiguity in these Norse regions. This is a trend that we see all across the world, but I think most importantly, in a meme, in the video by Pilot Red Sun, The Grinch's Ultimatum, a man who is suffering is visited by Santa Claus, and Santa Claus says, well, what's it going to be? You can be a saint, or you can be a Grinch. And there we have very clearly the same dichotomy that I was describing. One between the good demon and the bad demon, when in fact we are all essentially beyond good and evil. Pagans, free from that moral tyranny. I talked about this a bit in the video on ghosts and spirits, when I talked about the trickster, and how the trickster plays a compensatory relationship to the saint. That, in fact, the Christmas celebration itself is an expression of this. Saturnalia, one would appoint a fool king and then kill him at the end of the holiday. This is still done, actually, in Catholic households, where they'll pick a child who gets to order everybody around, but then at the end of the night they spank him. So it's very interesting to see the evolution of the concept of the Fool King go into, as Jung describes it, the Christian Fool Pope, and, of course, into various modern traditions. So we can see the split that Odin represents: Santa Claus and Krampus, Saint Nick and Old Nick. The death of the old god. The great god Pan is dead, and we have killed him. So, to understand fully the birth of Christ, I think we need to look into the context of the time period he was born into. Now, if you watched all the Bible stories, you know that he was born into Rome, into Roman slavery and rule, blah, blah, blah. But we don't really get the religious context. You just hear, oh, the Roman gods were fake, or unimportant, or demons. But I'm actually going to read you a little quote from G.K. Chesterton, which I think illustrates fully what really matters here, which is the death of Pan leading directly to the birth of Christ. And he says, "It is said truly in a sense that Pan died because Christ was born. It is almost as true, in another sense, that men knew that Christ was born because Pan was already dead. A void was made by the vanishing world of the whole mythology of mankind, which would have asphyxiated like a vacuum if it had not been filled with theology." And that is from The End of the World, The Everlasting Man. So we get this image of a nihilistic void, which is made by a literal death of the god Pan. The Roman Emperor Tiberius actually investigated the death of Pan and found that it was true. This matters immensely, because we are witnessing the horned god, the god of nature, dying, and then Christ, the fish god, being born. And what does that illustrate for us as well? The precession of the zodiacal aeons. Now, before Christ was the aeon of Aries, with Pan, of course, being the emblem of Aries, the chaotic, brutal, pagan era, into Christ, who we know is associated with fish. You still see people driving with fish on their car or fish on their rings, and so on. I'm not going to get heavily into the symbolism of Christ and the fish, but if you're interested, I'm utilizing Jung's book Ion for this concept. But we see that it is a literal death of an old god that leads to the necessity for the birth of a new god. And of course, if you're familiar with Nietzsche, we know that our God, the Christian God, dies as well, leaving, as Chesterton describes, a nihilistic vacuum, one which we need to fill with meaning. This is the very problem that Jung is talking about. As we enter the aeon of Aquarius, the aeon of the individual, what are we to do? We're still celebrating Christmas, for example, and yet, how many of you watching really believe in God? And if you do believe in God, is he still alive? Where is he? The 2,000 years that make up an aeon, that is the time period in which gods rule. It's described in Exodus when Moses literally kills off the Egyptian gods. I think that it's very important to look at religious concepts not just as a universal truth, but as a temporary truth, as a truth fitted for its time period. Just as I've talked about in the concept of memes, that memes have a allotted time where they are very effective and then become cringe or cursed, just as old gods do. There always comes a time when old gods must die and new gods must be born. And to end on a little light note, a little bit of Christmas joy, we have a brilliant story which is the King of Cats. Now, the King of Cats is based directly upon the death of Pan. And we follow a little farmer who is walking home and he sees a procession of cats carrying a little coffin, standing upright, and he is shocked. And one of the cats comes to him and says, "Tell Tim Toldrum that Tom Tildrum is dead. And he's taken aback. He's never heard a cat speak before. And he gets home and he tells his wife the story. And when the cat hears it, he says, "Oh, Tim Tildrum is dead. Then I'm the king of cats." And he springs up and he runs out the door. That is the very story that we're talking about. Who's the king of cats? And with that, I will wish you all a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Thank you for watching. Thank you for checking out Meme Analysis. I hope you've enjoyed. And as always, remember, memes matter.